not know. We have always made a profit at the prices we have fixed, and just as we have no idea how high wages will go, we also have no idea how low prices will go, but there is no particular use in bothering on that point. The tractor, for instance, was first sold for $750, then at $850, then at $625, and the other day we cut it 37% to $395. The tractor is not made in connection with the automobiles. No plant is large enough to make two articles. A shop has to be devoted to exactly one product in order to get the real economies. For most purposes, a man with a machine is better than a man without a machine. By the order of design of product and of manufacturing process, we were able to provide that kind of a machine which most multiplies the power of the hand, and therefore we give to that man a larger role of service, which means that he is entitled to a larger share of comfort. Keeping that principle in mind, we can attack waste with a definite objective. We will not put into our establishment anything that is useless. We will not put up elaborate buildings as monuments to our success. The interest on the investment and the cost of their upkeep will only serve to add uselessly to the cost of what is produced. So these monuments of success are apt to end as tombs. A great administration building may be necessary. In me, it arouses a suspicion that perhaps there is too much administration. We have never found a need for elaborate administration and would prefer to be advertised by our product than where we make our product. The standardization that effects large economies for the consumer results in profits of such gross magnitude to the producer that he can scarcely know what to do with his money. But his effort must be sincere, painstaking, and fearless. Cutting out a half a dozen models is not standardizing. It may be, and usually is, only the limiting of business. For if one is selling on the ordinary basis of profit, that is, on the basis of taking as much money away from the consumer as he will give up, then surely the consumer ought to have a wide range of choice. Standardization, then, is the final stage of the process. We start with consumer, work back through the design, and finally arrive at manufacturing. The manufacturing becomes a means to the end of service. It is important to bear this order in mind. As yet, the order is not thoroughly understood. The price relation is not understood. The notion persists that prices ought to be kept up. On the contrary, good business, large consumption, depends on their going down. And here is another point. The service must be the best you can give. It is considered good manufacturing practice, and not bad ethics, occasionally to change designs so that old models will become obsolete and new ones will have to be bought either because repair parts for the old cannot be had or because the new model offers a new sales argument which can be used to persuade a consumer to scrap what he has and buy something new. We have been told that this is good business, that it is clever business, that the object of business ought to be to get people to buy frequently, and that it is bad business to try to make anything that will last forever, because when once a man is sold, he will not buy again. Our principle of business is precisely to the contrary. We cannot conceive how to serve a consumer unless we make for him something that, as far as we can provide, will last forever. We want to construct some kind of a machine that will last forever. It does not please us to have a buyer's car wear out or become obsolete. We want the man who buys one of our products never to have to buy another. We never make an improvement that renders any previous model obsolete. The parts of a specific model are not only interchangeable with all other cars of that model, but they are interchangeable with similar parts on all the cars that we have turned out. You can take a car of 10 years ago and, buying today's parts, make it with very little expense into a car of today. Having these objectives, the costs always come down under pressure. And since we have the firm policy of steady price reduction, there is always pressure. Sometimes it is just harder. Take a few more instances of saving. The sweepings net $600,000 a year. Experiments are constantly going on in the utilization of scrap. In one of the stamping operations, 6-inch circles of sheet metal are cut out. These formerly went into scrap. The waste worried the men. They worked to find uses for the discs. They found that the plates were just the right size and shape to stamp into radiator caps, but the metal was not thick enough. They tried a double thickness of plates, with the result that they made a cap which tests proved to be stronger than one made out of a single sheet of metal. We get 150,000 of those discs a day. We have now found a use for about 20,000 a day and expect to find further uses for the remainder. We saved about $10 each by making transmissions instead of buying them. We experimented with bolts and produced a special bolt made on what is called an upsetting machine with a rolled thread that was stronger than any bolt we could buy, although in its making was used only about 1/3 of the material that the outside manufacturers used. The saving on one style of bolt alone amounted to $500,000 a year. We used to assemble our cars at Detroit, and although by special packing we managed to get 5 or 6 into a freight car, we needed many hundreds of freight cars a day. Trains were moving in and out all the time. Once, 1,000 freight cars were packed in a single day. A certain amount of congestion was inevitable. It is very expensive to knock down machines and crate them so they cannot be injured in transit. To say nothing of the transportation charges. Now, we assemble only 300 or 400 cars a day at Detroit, just enough for local needs. We now ship the parts to our assembling stations all over the United States, and in fact, pretty much all over the world, and the machines are put together there. Wherever it is possible for a branch to make a part more cheaply than we can make in Detroit and ship it to them, then the branch makes the part. The plant at Manchester, England, is making nearly an entire car. The tractor plant at Cork, Ireland, is making almost a complete tractor. This is an enormous saving of expense and is only an indication of what may be done throughout industry generally. When each part of a composite article is made at the exact point where it may be made most economically. We are constantly experimenting with every material that enters into the car. We cut most of our own lumber from our own forests. We are experimenting in the manufacture of artificial leather because we use about 40,000 yards of artificial leather a day. A penny here and a penny there runs into large amounts in the course of a year. The greatest development of all, however, is the River Rouge plant, which, when it is running to its full capacity, will cut deeply and in many directions into the price of everything we make. The whole tractor plant is now there. This plant is located on the river on the outskirts of Detroit, and the property covers 665 acres, enough for future development. It has a large slip and a turning basin capable of accommodating any lake steamship. A shortcut canal and some dredging will give a direct lake connection by way of the Detroit River. We use a great deal of coal. The coal comes directly from our mines over the Detroit, Toledo, and Ironton Railway, which we control, to the Highland Park plant and the River Rouge plant. Part of it goes for steam purposes. Another part goes to the byproduct coke ovens, which we have established at the River Rouge plant. Coke moves on from the ovens by mechanical transmission to the blast furnaces. The low volatile gases from the blast furnaces are piped to the power plant boilers, where they are joined by the sawdust and the shavings from the body plant. The making of all our bodies has been shifted to this plant. In addition, the coke breeze, the dust in making of coke, is now also being utilized for stoking. The steam power plant is thus fired almost exclusively from what would otherwise be waste products. Immense steam turbines, directly coupled with dynamos, transform this power into electricity, and all of the machinery in the tractor and the body plants is run by individual motors from this electricity. In the course of time, it is expected that there will be sufficient electricity to run practically the whole Highland Park plant, and we shall then have to cut our coal bill. Among the byproducts of the coke ovens is a gas. It is piped both to the Rouge and Highland Park plants, where it is used for heat treat purposes, for the enameling ovens, for the car ovens, and the like. We formerly had to buy this gas. The ammonium sulfate is used for fertilizer. The benzol is a motor fuel. The small sizes of coke, not suitable for the blast furnaces, are sold to the employees, delivered free into their homes at much less than the ordinary market price. The largest size coke goes to the blast furnaces. There is no manual handling. We run the melted iron directly from the blast furnaces into great ladles. These ladles travel into the shops, and the iron is poured directly into the molds without another heating. We thus not only get a uniform quality of iron according to our own specifications and directly under our control, but we save a melting of pig iron and, in fact, cut out a whole process in manufacturing, as well as making available all our own scrap. What all this will amount to in point of savings, we do not know. That is, we do not know how great will be the saving, because the plant has not been running long enough to give more than an indication of what is ahead. And we save in so many directions: in transportation, in the generation of our power, in the generation of gas, in the expense, in casting. And then over and above, that is the revenue from the byproducts and from the smaller sizes of coke. The investment to accomplish these objectives to date amounts to something over $40 million. How far we shall thus reach back to sources depends entirely on circumstances. Nobody anywhere can really do more than guess about the future costs of production. It is wiser to recognize that the future holds more than the past, that every day holds within it an improvement on the methods of the day before. But how about production? If every necessary of life were produced so cheaply and in such quantities, would not the world shortly be surfeited with goods? Will there not come a point when, regardless of price, people simply will not want anything more than what they already have? And if in the process of manufacturing fewer and fewer men are used, what is going to become of these men? How are they going to find jobs and live? Take the second point first. We mentioned many machines and many methods that displaced great numbers of men, and then someone asks, yes, that is a very fine idea from the standpoint of the proprietor, but how about these poor fellows whose jobs are taken away from them? The question is entirely reasonable, but it is a little curious that it should be asked. For when were men ever really put out of work by the bettering of industrial processes? The stagecoach drivers lost their jobs with the coming of the railways. Should we have prohibited the railways and kept the stagecoach drivers? Were there more men working with the stagecoaches than are working on the railways? Should we have prevented the taxicab because its coming took the bread out of the mouths of the horse cab drivers? How does the number of taxicabs compare with the number of horse cabs when the latter were in their prime? The coming of shoe machinery closed most of the shops of those who made shoes by hand. When shoes were made by hand, only the very well-to-do could own more than a single pair of shoes. And most working people went barefooted in summer. Now, hardly anyone has only one pair of shoes, and shoemaking is a great industry. No, every time you can so arrange that one man will do the work of two, you so add to the wealth of the country that there will be a new and better job for the man who is displaced. If whole industries changed overnight, then disposing of the surplus men would be a problem, but these changes do not occur as rapidly as that. They come gradually. In our own experience, a new place always opens for a man as soon as better processes have taken his old job. And what happens in my shops happens everywhere in industry. There are many times more men today employed in the steel industries than there were in the days when every operation was by hand. It has to be so. It always is so, and always will be so. And if any man cannot see it, it is because he will not look beyond his own nose. Now, as to saturation, we are continually asked, when will you get to the point of overproduction? When will there be more cars than people to use them? We believe it is possible someday to reach the point where all goods are produced so cheaply and in such quantities that overproduction will be a reality. But as far as we are concerned, we do not look forward to that condition with fear. We look forward to it with great satisfaction. Nothing could be more splendid than a world in which everybody has all that he wants. Our fear is that this condition will be too long postponed. As to our own products, that condition is very far away. We do not know how many motor cars a family will desire to use of the particular kind that we make. We know that, as the price has come down, the farmer, who at first used one car, and it must be remembered that it is not so very long ago that the farm market for motor cars was absolutely unknown. The limit of sales was at that time fixed by all the wise statistical sharps at somewhere near the number of millionaires in the country. Now often uses two, and also he buys a truck. Perhaps, Instead of sending workmen out to scattered jobs in a single car, it will be cheaper to send each worker out in a car of his own. That is happening with salesmen. The public finds its own consumptive needs with unerring accuracy. And since we no longer make motor cars or tractors, but merely the parts which then assembled become motor cars and tractors, the facilities as now provided would hardly be sufficient to provide replacements for 10 million cars. And it would be quite the same with any business. We do not have to bother about overproduction for some years to come, provided the prices are right. It is the refusal of people to buy on account of price that really stimulates real business. Then, if we want to do business, we have to get the prices down without hurting the quality. Thus, price reduction forces us to learn improved and less wasteful methods of production. One big part of the discovery is what normal in industry depends on managerial genius discovering better ways of doing things. If a man reduces his selling price to a point where he is making no profit or incurring a loss, then he simply is forced to discover how to make as good an article by a better method, making his new method produce the profit and not producing a profit out of reduced wages or increased prices to the public. It is not good management to take profits out of the workers or the buyers. Make management produce the profits. Don't cheapen the product. Don't cheapen the wage. Don't overcharge the public. Put brains into the method and more brains and still more brains. Do things better than ever before. And by this means, all parties to business are served and benefited. And all of this can always be done. End of chapter 10. Chapter 11. Money and Goods. The primary object of a manufacturing business is to produce, and if that objective is always kept, finance becomes a wholly secondary matter that has largely to do with bookkeeping. My own financial operations have been very simple. I started with the policy of buying and selling for cash, keeping a large fund of cash always on hand, taking full advantage of all discounts, and collecting interest on bank balances. I regard a bank principally as a place in which it is safe and convenient to keep money. The minutes we spend on a competitor's business, we lose on our own. The minutes we spend in becoming expert in finance, we lose in production. The place to finance a manufacturing business is the shop, and not the bank. I would not say that a man in business needs to know nothing at all about finance, but he is better off knowing too little than too much, for if he becomes too expert, he will get into the way of thinking that he can borrow money instead of earning it, and then he will borrow more money to pay back what he has borrowed, and instead of being a businessman, he will be a note juggler, trying to keep in the air a regular flock of bonds and notes. If he is a really expert juggler, he may keep going quite a long time in this fashion, but someday he is bound to make a miss, and the whole collection will come tumbling down around him. Manufacturing is not to be confused with banking, and I think that there is a tendency for too many businessmen to mix up in banking and for too many bankers to mix up in business. The tendency is to distort the true purposes of both business and banking, and that hurts both of them. The money has to come out of the shop, not out of the bank. And I have found that the shop will never answer every possible requirement. And in one case, when it was believed that the company was rather seriously in need of funds, the shop, when called on, raised a larger sum than any bank in this country could loan. We have been thrown into finance mostly on the way of denial. Some years back, we had to keep standing a denial that the Ford Motor Company was owned by the Standard Oil Company, and with that denial, for convenience's sake, we coupled a denial that we were connected with any other concern or that we intended to sell cars by mail. Last year, the best liked rumor was that we were down in Wall Street hunting for money. I did not bother to deny that. It takes too much time to deny everything. Instead, we demonstrated that we did not need any money. Since then, I have heard nothing more about being financed by Wall Street. We are not against borrowing money, and we are not against bankers. We are against trying to make borrowed money take the place of work. We are against the kind of banker who regards a business